What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite filmmakers and the deeper meaning within those movies. It's another sunny day in Southern California. We're sweating. We're hot. And we're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson Part 2. We are talking about his 4 films known as There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, and his most recent one, which is Phantom Thread, which he was nominated for Best Director. Obviously, he didn't win, but he was still nominated, and that's that.
Yeah, that's dope.
I mean, Phantom Thread came out pretty late. This was a movie that a lot of people were anticipating because there was, like, no trailer.
Yeah, no trailer until, like, literally, like, 2 weeks before it came out.
Pretty much,
like,
man.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Hopefully,
Hopefully you guys enjoyed our part 1 of Paul Thomas Anderson. Now we're getting into the part 2. And a lot of people do feel like there was a shift as far as the style of movies and the type of themes he hit within these next 4 films versus his first 4 films. What say you, Mr. Robert Butler III?
Whoa, that's a big question, man. I definitely do get the whole idea of, like, the old PTA versus new PTA.
Yeah.
Like,
I want the old Kanye.
I'm kidding. Old Kanye. I was going to say old Kanye versus new Kanye. Right? I think there's a very clear breaking point somewhere in between Punch Drunk Love and There Will Be Blood. He had a very Scorsese influenced style, particularly. I know a lot of people say Boogie Nights is kind of a Scorsese kind of ripoff in a lot of ways.
Not ripoff, but yeah, very much like
very stylized in the same kind of way. With
it
the
is kind of Scorsese,
and the tracking shots. That one, and of course, you know, like I mentioned a lot in part 1, the Robert Altman connections in terms of the ensemble and stuff. I feel like in the second half of his career, speaking on, you know, There Will Be Blood and these other films that he's done, The Master, Inherent Vice, and Phantom Thread, they're all kind of more stripped back in the style sense, but they have more to say. But it's a different style too, though. I feel like I think there's a very clear distinction. There's different composers. I mean, early on in his career, all the way up until Punch Drunk Love, he worked with John Bryant as his composer. But from There Will Be Blood on forward, he's working with Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, and there's a distinction there, and I think that's
Greenwood did Phantom Thread, right?
Phantom Thread, yeah, he did Phantom Thread.
That was my favorite score of last year.
Really?
I remember we talked about that.
Yeah,
you didn't like
say
it.
That. No, I like it. It's just I don't like 90 minutes of a score. That's all.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, no, but I definitely think you watch. I see. This is probably where my bias a little bit comes in. I love the new films that Paul Thomas Anderson does. I personally am a fan of, like, to me, music plays the biggest part in any movie. To me, and the music that he had in his earlier films, with particularly like Magnolia and Punch Drunk Love, like, those scores are very whimsical, very, like, almost magical to a certain extent, but very classical as well. These new scores are very, like, hard hitting, very, like, they very much put you in the climate of what the film's about, which is good, and that should be the point of the music in anything that in any movie. I just personally I like the more of the like the more whimsical kind of, you know, fluffy kind of composition as compared to something like There Will Be Blood, where it's literally just like clanking wood. Yeah.
Like, literally, there's, like, entire scene where it's just like, and I'm just like, hell yeah, hell yeah. That's me when I'm watching. I disagree completely, dude. Yeah. I love the score of There Will Be Blood. I think it's
I love it too.
Amazing. I think it's so good.
Yeah.
And obviously I talked about Phantom Thread too, how much I love that score and how it stayed in my head for, like, weeks, basically. Mm-hmm. Even with the trailer, it stayed in my head. But yeah, I get what you're saying. You prefer the other one, the softer one.
I like softer music, but that being said, though, it's not like I don't love these scores. I actually use.
I was gonna say the scores. I love it, dude. I love these scores.
Yeah, it's not like I don't love what There Will Be Blood. I actually used some music from There Will Be Blood, and, like, one of my very early, like, high school, like, short little films I did back then. I'm in love with that kind of music too. But, you know, these movies are less about the personalities, I think, and more about like the general. But they're still very much character driven. But I feel like they represent a lot more thematically than I think his earlier films do.
You think he's hitting on bigger themes? You mean?
Yeah, I
as
think
far
there's
as, like wider nets than just more intimate stories.
I think the stories are smaller in a lot of sense, but it's very clear what they represent. If we're gonna talk about There Will Be Blood,
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
There Will Be Blood, which came out in
2007.
2007. There you go.
That is a film that I think, to me, that whole film is a larger allegorical metaphor for the idea of religion versus capitalism, and how they kind of represent similar ideologies in a lot of ways too. And I think that's a very powerful message that's being put to the forefront here, particularly with the character of Daniel Day-Lewis. Like we talked about in part one, how the John and the John. This one is like the Daniel and the Daniel.
Yeah.
And I think this movie, this movie could walk a very fine line of being super boring and super like uninteresting, but it subverts that by, like, even though it's very slow and very slow paced, it has this sort of raw energy that puts on the forefront by Daniel Day-Lewis, like this really drawn out, very specific, narrow-minded character, which is loosely based on Doheny. I can't remember his first name, but Doheny. I can't remember William Doheny or something like that. Edward Doheny. I think it's Edward Doheny. He is like this oil tycoon in the 1930s, who is big in Los Angeles. He came to LA, and he's obviously responsible. He was one of the founding creators of USC. He created a big mansion. He built a big mansion here in LA. I think it's called the Greenwood Mansion, which they actually shot the ending of this film at. And has a lot of big influence in LA because he was this big oil tycoon that came back. And then I think Francis St. Clair wrote the book Oil, loosely based on the story of Doheny and all that stuff. And then that's where Paul Thomas Anderson took the greatest inspiration for There Will Be Blood. So yeah, it's this movie in particular is a very like sprawling story that starts at the beginning with Daniel Plainview, just like 15 minutes of like complete silence with like no dialogue, but you just see him struggling as he's like, you just see his endurance through and through. Like when he literally breaks his leg and like crawls his way back to society. And that's crazy. If you look at that shot when he's like crawling, there's nothing. Can you imagine how far he had to like go to like? So that's, it just shows you right off the back. That's the kind of will, this kind of determination that this guy has.
And that's Daniel Day-Lewis in a nutshell, who probably did that take a ton of times, and he'll do the whole thing. Like he has full commitment. Like that guy is committed, the most committed actor working today, in my opinion. But he's incredible. But yeah, keep going on that.
Yeah, no, I just think it's like incredibly like fascinating how. Just how that will and determination influences Daniel Plainview like as an individual, and how we're so drawn to this character because we want to see what he's gonna do next. And I think that's what keeps this movie afloat, and what keeps this movie. He's the rock. He's the center of the story. And his performance is just so well drawn out, so meticulous down to the voice. The voice is very precise.
Look, the mustache, the way he stands, his lankiness, like
his diction, the way he speaks.
Yeah,
it's very dope.
It's incredible. I mean, this is a movie that showcases why Daniel Day-Lewis is GOAT, man. I mean, if you want to see why he's GOAT, watch There Will Be Blood. Like it's incredible the way he commits to this character and the way he develops this character. To be honest, man, this is probably my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson
Really?
movie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this movie to me is just bonkers. I think it's amazing. And it's very much as you say it is about oil and it's about religion and it's about capitalism, which it is. I do feel at the end of the day it's still about Daniel Plainview and about his characterization, his story, his decisions, the way, what made this man and what situations happened to this man to make him end up where he ended up eventually in the movie. But what happens to a man who starts out one way and keeps going down a path of ambition? Because it's all about ambition, right? And his path of desperate ambition and passion and dedication and competitiveness, right? Because he's one of the most competitive people ever. And at the end of the day, that's kind of his starting traits in the movie. His starting traits aren't anger, aren't alcoholism, which eventually he gets to. But that's not what he starts out as. He starts out as incredibly ambitious businessman who's very much in the oil business and who's very much a very, very smart guy, like incredibly intelligent kind of guy who uses opportunity and who uses business methods, capitalistic methods to get his way and to work the system, essentially is what it is, because he's working the system. And that's initially how he starts out as, and that's eventually where his character ends up, is in a very different position. But he starts out as kind of, in a way, a well-meaning, ambitious businessman who's just wants to make the most amount of money that he can, but nothing else. Obviously, he'll work the system, he'll manipulate certain people, but that's what businessmen do. So for me, it's like, where does he end up eventually is obviously a very darker place and a very different place. And he meets an opponent, which is religion, which is funny because that's an opponent to him. And not just religion, man, but I really want to point out and say extreme weird, like super crazy Paul Dano religion. Like this is some, like his preaching scene, like his first preaching scene when he's just pushing that who shot this movie, because it's incredible.
It's his frequent collaborator. I forget exactly his name.
This movie is incredibly well shot.
Oh, dude, absolutely.
Robert Elswit.
Yeah, Robert Elswit, that's his name.
Who shot this movie.
Yeah.
And he has that scene in the church where it pushes in on Paul Dano preaching, and then it pushes out when he's like pushing out the what is it, the ghost or the demon or whatever it is.
Right,
he's like,
right.
go out of here, go out of here, and he's like pushing, and the camera's like backing out with him.
Right. That's
incredible.
Yeah,
like that's just incredible in general. And the camera work in that scene is gnarly. And right now I'm glowing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm trying to figure
in
out
the presence of the Lord.
This window right here.
Yeah, I can't help it.
Well, I was gonna see. I'm literally thinking of ways I could try and color correct it when
it's not.
Because you look like a ghost, dude. I'm not gonna lie. Like
I look like I'm blessed, man. I'm a saint.
You look like you just went to Paul Dano's church to hear what's his name? Elijah?
Yeah,
Eli. Yeah. Which, by the way, also is loosely translated to my God. That's what that name's supposed to mean, which is, again, that
which essentially is what it is, man. Because as I'm watching this, and someone who considers himself to be, part of the faith, it's like, give me 5 minutes of this guy and I can tell you who he is. He's a showboater. He's a manipulator, and he's a guy who uses theatricality and those kind of tactics to manipulate a congregation into believing that he's a bigger human being who's chosen by God and who's blessed by the spirits and all this bullshit. It really is what it is. And it's all just manipulation, and it's all just ego-driven kind of messaging, because that's what it is. It's ego. And it's a battle of egos in the beginning of this movie, which I love so much, because it all comes down to that prayer that he wants to give to the oil well when he opens up the oil well there, he says, "Let me say a prayer and open up the oil well tomorrow." And Daniel Day-Lewis, his character Daniel, is like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't need to give you anything, bro." It's an ego kind of mentality, because he could have just let him say a prayer and it would have been fine. But his ego was like, "Nah, I'm the one who gives you orders. You don't give me orders," kind of thing. So he has that battle between Paul and Daniel, and it's kind of a battle of kind of ambitious business capitalism and religion, and kind of crazy religious people, and kind of how it goes hand in hand and how it goes head to head in a way. I don't know if you see that as well.
And how it kind of crescendos into like this whole this whole battle that Daniel's facing with in and of himself. Because I think in many ways Daniel Playville has his own God complex. He thinks he's the most powerful being of all, around.
True, and he's definitely not a believer at all.
Yeah.
He makes that very clear at the end of the movie. But you're right. It's definitely much what he views himself as someone who's superior to any type of religion or any type of influence.
And what's interesting, and I think this movie alludes to it, but it never like outright says it. I think Daniel Plainview is very familiar with religion. I think he's probably grew up in some sort of past where he had read the book, the Bible, plenty of times over and over. I think he's very religious, and I say that because at the end of the film, when him and Eli have that fight in the bowling alley, and he ultimately ends up killing him, and the butler comes back in, and he says that line, "I'm finished." Now, if you read the Bible, that's, depending on what translation you're reading, "I'm finished" is the last words of Jesus Christ.
When Jesus was on the cross.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I think that's very intentional in a lot of ways too. So overall, I just think he's somebody who knows religion but just outright rejects it and doesn't want to and doesn't even want to involve. I'm looking at the IMDb thing. It says Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair is the novelist who wrote Oil, which this is loosely based on. And by the way, if you're interested in learning any bits and pieces of LA history, read that novel and you get like a really understanding of how Los Angeles, the city, was like built to the place that it is now. Had to read it for a class one time. So, but going back to There Will Be Blood, this is definitely it's the whole idea of religion and how religion kind of bows it. I also think it's also another, again, consistent with the Paul Thomas Anderson thread of a family, the father and son relationship between,
which is heartbreaking. HW
and Plainville, because I really do feel like Daniel Plainville, even though he's a very empathetic person, he doesn't really care about emotions at all. He doesn't care about people at all. But I think HW is like the one person he truly cared about.
Absolutely. You see that in the scene where obviously he hits his head and he loses his hearing. And at the end of the day, man, that scene following up the fire, when he's just laying with him, and he's and HW is trying to hear his own humming. He's going and he's humming to himself.
Right.
And Paul and Daniel is like rubbing his head and telling him to calm down and stuff. And like you can't, I know it's acting, but you can't deny that he cares about his son. You just know it. You're just like, I buy it. I don't care how, like you said, how void of emotion this guy is. He cares about his son. And just in that one scene, you could see it. Or even when he's leaving his son on the train and how he when that guy says, you can go take care of your son, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna slit your throat, bro. And he was like, what'd you say? What do you mean you want to slit my throat? But he like takes it so personal because he knows that that's his one thing that he has. And he as soon as he loses his son, that's kind of him losing himself too. That's his one connection to humanity and emotion. And obviously the character of his brother too, his fake brother coming in, is also a characterization of his emotion and of his connection to humanity, essentially, because he's such a person who's so disconnected from humanity. But when he meets his fake brother, he kind of views that as a way to reopen a new chapter of his life that he closed with his son when he left him on the train.
Well, I think HW is not even really his biological son. He's just a kid that he found in the basket.
And it turns out that brother is not even his real brother, too.
Yeah. I think that's, and it's, again, another kind of Jesus metaphor and maybe, like another religious metaphor as well, with the basket, the kid in the basket, all that kind of stuff. And I think it all builds to that point. But, going back to HW, too, as he grows as a character, he starts to develop his own like resentment for Daniel Plainville as well, and I think that's why he's so heartbroken. That's why he sends him to boarding school. But then, like at the end, when Daniel's having that baptism and he's yelling, "I abandoned my son! I abandoned my son!" Like you could really feel that in that, and the power that Daniel Day-Lewis brings to that performance is really informative. So I think that's one of the bigger things in this movie that's the anchor, the emotional anchor for Elijah's part. And Paul Dano as well has his own kind of interesting arc, not just as Eli, but as the fake twin that comes in at the beginning. Paul. Paul, another Paul.
There
Paul,
you go.
Right. By the way, I don't know if you knew this, but like Paul Dano was originally just casted for the part of Paul.
No way.
But then like 4 days before they started shooting, Paul Thomas Anderson didn't like the guy who played Eli, so he fired him and had Paul Dano come in to like play that part and just made them twins.
What?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's really weird. But yeah, Paul Dano is amazing in this film.
He is.
He definitely brings out the kind of strange weirdness of a lot of these like religious figures and how they're you mentioned before how they're driven by their own egotism, and this is definitely an example of that. And you see that ultimately in the result of Eli's actions. I mean, he becomes a radio preacher. So I mean, I don't know, as most like kind of globalized egotistical person you could be, but he comes back asking for $100,000. And it's just really, like you mentioned, that whole church scene and that the acting there. Almost every scene Paul Dano in, he almost kind of steals it almost in his own kind of way. Which I think is just really fascinating.
I think that scene, the baptism scene, is just crazy too, man. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, when he's like slapping him and stuff, and then Paul Dano's character Eli is like yelling at him, and he's just like, blah blah. He's just yelling gibberish basically.
Yeah.
And then Daniel Day-Lewis's character Daniel is just like kind of yelling gibberish back. You don't even know what he's really saying. No, but in scene, like rewatching that scene, you don't even know what they're saying. You just hear like blah blah, and he's like blah 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 blah. It's just like him going crazy, and you could tell. But in a way, like you said, like Eli is kind of bringing his own version of insanity and pulling out the insanity of someone who's already broken. It's almost like you're rattling the insides of a human being who's cracking. You're making it worse for someone who like you said, like I abandoned my son, and he's just losing his mind now. And Eli is just making it worse by just putting some voodoo shit on him. Right. Just pulling it, slapping it with like some weird ass voodoo shit. And he's like freaking doing a voodoo dance and shit. But in that scene, you see like Daniel Plainview, who's such like a uptight businessman, who's very smart and intelligent and well respected. He views everything logistically and logical and financially, is now like going crazy inside a church building where everyone's yelling and screaming random gibberish, and he's starting to scream random gibberish too. And he's just kind of losing his shit. And it's one of those things where insanity invites more insanity in a way, where it's like the people you surround yourself with, even if it's your enemy in a sense, because in a way Eli is his enemy, it's still like a kind of thing where you're submitting to an enemy who's making you kind of go nuts. It's the Joker Batman type thing, where Joker's crazy, Batman's crazy too, and they're both kind of giving themselves more craziness in a way. And that's kind of what you see with Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday in the two characterizations, especially in that scene. And you see that all crescendo to the final scene of the movie with the incredible scene, which I still think is so incredible because I rewatched it on Saturday, and I was blown away. I still was blown away, dude, because I've seen that before, but it's just so crazy.
I drink your milkshake.
I drink your milkshake. He's like, I got a straw all the way over here, and I pull the straw into your milkshake, and I drink your milkshake. Like, it's just so good, dude. It's so, and the way he like, he's doing all these mannerisms, and he's like kind of like limping and stuff, and he's like, it's just incredible, dude.
Yeah,
it's
I think,
just,
and
he's like telling him to say that like God doesn't exist and I'm a false prophet or something.
Yeah,
he's this is your congregation, Eli. It's your congregation.
Yeah.
Like, say it again.
Yeah.
Say it again. And he's like laughing and smiling, and it's just evil. Like, it's really evil what he's doing to him.
Right.
It's pure evil.
Well, I think that's Daniel Day-Lewis's breaking point. That's where, or Daniel Plainville's breaking point.
Yeah.
That's where he's like, all right, fuck all this religious shit. Fuck everything. Like, I am gonna be me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like I mentioned, the character Eli. His name's Eli for my God, and of course, his last name is Sunday. To Daniel Day-Lewis, that's him like finally getting the opportunity to kill off religion, kill off God, or his physical manifestation of God, and he's confronting that and fighting that and ultimately killing that towards the end. So I feel like that's where he feels like his ultimate bad guy, and that limp that he has throughout the entire movie, it literally
so good.
It gets like worse and worse.
It does. At the end, he's just like a giant lip guy. He's just walking like this, and it's so good.
It's
great.
Yeah, I always notice for like little continuity shit like that. they had a similar thing like that in Shape of Water, where Michael, what's his name? Michael Shannon, his finger kept getting worse and worse throughout the entire film, and then like ultimately he just pulls it out. I feel like that. I almost kind of want to see like Daniel Plainfield just like
pull out his leg
or something, like, you know, just destroy his leg, like this is over, you know. But it's just funny how that all.
But that scene is incredible, man.
Yeah,
and that to me, like I was thinking about this more and more. This is me going off topic and going into a nerd mode, but I got to do it. My buddy and I at work, we were talking about characterizations of villains in movies, and we were talking about the Doctor Doom movie that's supposed to come out.
But Noah Hawley.
With Noah Hawley,
yes,
who does Legion, and we were talking about like how this. Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? How are you going to do Doctor Doom? And how can you do Doctor Doom doing a villain-centered movie? And then I was talking, and he was talking about how like, oh yeah, but sometimes villains don't work. Like look at Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor has never worked on screen. And I was like, well, he worked well in Smallville, but then he made a counter argument and said, well, he worked well in Smallville because of the time he has to spread out between episodes and seasons. And I was like, that's a fair point. But I feel like Lex Luthor is my all-time favorite villain. I've said it like a million times on this podcast. Daniel Plainview. There you go. That's Lex Luthor. That scene right there to me was pure Lex. Like that to me is like a corrupt, egotistical, ambitious businessman with a God complex who kind of rubs it in people's faces and who knows he's better than everyone else and can do whatever he wants. Boom. Daniel Day-Lewis as Lex Luthor. That Daniel Plainview in this movie, that's Lex Luthor. Like you can describe that in general, how he's like supposedly a well-meaning businessman, but he's got just such a giant chip on his shoulder. He's not completely devoid of emotion, but in a way he kind of is devoid of emotion. Like that is Lex. If you want to make Lex into a movie, that is what it is. And that to me is so cool to see, because I finally see that version of evil, right? It's a version of evil of not necessarily evil. It's like mustache twirling Lex. Haha, I've got you now, Superman. It's more like frustration and being found head to head with something that might be bigger than you. And that's what Superman represents to Lex. It's that version of like what is God represented Daniel Plainview is what Superman represents to Lex Luthor. An actual God versus someone who considers himself to be God. Boom. Come on now.
Hey,
that's my Lex Luthor, man.
You around the now. Man, maybe we could pull Daniel Day-Lewis out of retirement
to play Lex.
Play Lex. You think he'll sign a multi-film contract?
Nope, not this guy. But what I'm saying is like that scene in general is just so deliciously Daniel Day-Lewis and so good that I love that scene, and the fact that it ends like that with like, oh, I'm finished or something like that.
Yeah.
Is just so good, man. And the fact that scene where he like grabs a pin and hits him once, and he just kind of falls flat and kind of dies essentially, and you see Daniel like a brief moment where he's slightly concerned, where he's slightly like, oh shit, I killed him, and then he's like, hell yeah, I killed him.
Just keeps going at
just it. Just a brief second. If you rewatch that scene, he's slightly concerned of like, oh shit, he's dead. And then he realizes it, and he's like, hell yeah, he's dead. And he just keeps bashing it. And I'm like, shit, dude. Like, he really lost it. He lost it completely. But I think the breaking point of this movie for me is that awful, awkward, sad scene he has with his son, HW, as an adult, where he's telling him he's leaving. That, to me, is the most heartbreaking scene, because you can see his defiance and his alcoholism, his ambition take over himself to the point where he doesn't care about his son anymore. And now that he's an adult, now that he's a married man, and now that he has his own ambitions and his own desire to get into the oil business taught by his father, he should take that as like a proud moment. My son is becoming a powerful man on his own, even with hearing loss, even with being physically impaired. He's still incredibly ambitious, just like I am and just like I was. And instead, he sees that as, you're not my son. You can't even hear. You're disabled. You're an embarrassment. You're my competition now.
Right.
Like that's such a sad scene, man. I don't know about you, but that scene is heartbreaking. And he's like, when I want you to say it, not your translator and stuff like that. Right. Man, that scene is just like, it's nails on a chalkboard for me.
Didn't he say something along the effects of like, you're a basket bastard or something like that? Yeah.
No, he said you're worse than a bastard.
Oh, you're worse than a bastard.
You're an orphan and you're disabled or something like that. And I was like, dude, that's harsh.
Crazy. I mean, that's him turning his back. I mean, like he I think Daniel Playville is a character who oftentimes turns his back on the people he cares about in his life because he feels like he's competition now. Like his son, who he raised to be his son, who he raised to be the heir to his success, wants to do his own thing, and now he's competition. So I think that's what really hurt Daniel Playville and all the way up until the end. So. It's very powerful, man. I think this is one of PTA's. This was nominated for multiple Academy Awards, won 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Daniel won, right?
Daniel Day-Lewis won for Best Actor. Cinematography, I think it won for as well.
It's an incredible movie, and I mean, obviously, it's incredibly long too. It's super long.
Now I want to ask you this question. This was nominated the same year that No Country for Old Men was nominated for Best Picture. Now, do you think that was the right decision?
Oh, it's so funny because. Man, it's tough, man. They're just two different movies. They're so different.
They're different, but weirdly similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but one is mainly... Yeah. I don't know, man. I love No Country for Old Men. After rewatching this one, I would say this one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Just based on the overall... I love... No Country for Old Men is kind of like that, too. But I really like... drawn out movies, and this is definitely a drawn out movie.
Oh yeah.
You know how you were saying before how like a lot of people might say it's boring because it's so long and shit, but I kind of like drawn out movies, and this one is so drawn out, but it's drawn out to like a point of like perfection to me. That ending to me is just perfection in a way where it's like very few movies can match that.
I agree. I think
because when it ended for me, I was like perfect movie. Like that's my reaction as soon as he said I'm finished, and then it cuts and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. I was like perfect movie, straight up, no flaw. Like that to me was like a perfect movie.
Right.
But that's how I felt. But obviously I don't know. So
it's
tough to compare.
I actually kind of agree. I like Country for Old Men. I don't love it.
Yeah.
That's one of like the weaker Coen Brothers films to me
really?
Personally. Yeah.
Holy crap. That's the weaker one.
Yeah. No. Weirdly enough, I mean, a lot of people say that's like their favorite.
Yeah,
I know, and
that's probably my favorite.
Again, this is we're probably gonna have this debate a lot of like the old Coen Brothers versus the new Coen Brothers. So I was a big fan of theirs for like Fargo and like Big Lebowski and that type shit. So No Country was a very different movie, but they both shot at the same time. Both shot in Texas, which by the way, if you notice. There's a scene in No Country for Old Men where the background, there's like a lot of smoke and haze in the background or something like that. That's from There Will Be Blood filming like right in the next state, that big like oil scene.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There Will Be Blood shooting that big like oil explosion rig scene or whatever. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't rewatched No Country for Old Men in a while, so I'm not 100% sure if that's a big part of it. But I do kind of remember it's like, whoa, what's all this smoke doing? And watching There Will Be Blood, they apparently filmed during the same time. By the way, we didn't talk about that big like oil explosion like scene. I say probably one of the top. If you're talking about, and I know it's not an action movie, but to me that's like an action set piece. Probably one of the best action set pieces in cinema history.
Yeah.
Just from the construction, the editing of it, like the music,
the cinematography,
the whole like clanking thing that keeps happening as the thing wraps up. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And then the fact that you hear like his HW's POV of like not hearing anything during that super loud scene. Because for a few scenes you don't hear anything, and then you realize it's his point of view of not hearing. Which is awful and scary.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that. And obviously, Daniel Day-Lewis, man, not enough can be said about that guy, especially in this movie.
Yeah.
How he commits like 100%. Even when he's climbing that oil rig, you can see that's him.
Yeah.
That's so dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's like a set, but it's still like he can fall and you could kill him.
Yeah.
But he's like climbing that thing on his own, and he's actually climbing it and stuff, and actually grabbing the kid and stuff. And there's a scene where when HW sets the bed on fire,
right,
and when he runs out and try to get him, and then HW like runs far away, and Daniel is like, and he starts running faster after him, and you could see him like running as fast as he can, like in the desert, and then he comes back after running and like picks him up, and he's breathing super hard, and you could tell that's not acting, that's just him like tired from running.
Right.
And it's like he commits so hard in this movie, man. It's incredible. It's crazy how much he commits in this movie.
Right.
To the point that, like I said before, if you want cinematic, proof of why Daniel Day-Lewis is GOAT, watch this movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's my last word on it.
Yeah. No, There Be Blood, absolute masterpiece. It's probably his most highly regarded, and I'd probably say his best out of like the new era of movies that he's made. Even though all of them are great to their own extents.
Let's go to The Master, which is his following movie, which came out in 2012, starring another actor who a lot of people consider to be one of the best actors working today, and that's Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix, and obviously Philip Seymour Hoffman, who he's worked for before, but I believe this is the first time of him working with Joaquin. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And speaking of performances, we just went off about Daniel Day. Joaquin Phoenix in this movie, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, he's
so good.
He ramps it up to an 11 in this movie.
It's incredible.
It's so crazy. That whole. I don't know. I know we're starting like late in the film, but I can never forget. I can never watch this movie and not think of that prison scene where they're both locked up. And
yes, and he's going off like a monkey.
Yeah.
He's literally like a monkey.
Yeah, he's like banging his head.
It's like a bamboo going crazy.
Yeah, I don't understand as an actor. That must have hurt. Like he was like literally banging his back against the thing.
Yeah,
breaking
his head.
Yeah, breaking toilet seats and shit. Like that was wild.
Yeah.
That was literally insane. So that to me always trips me out. But yeah, one of the best performances.
What does PTA do to his actors, man? They get these.
I don't know.
Mark Wahlberg and Paul Thomas. Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, even Adam Sandler waking up for a performance. Sandler.
Yeah. Like, how does he get these performances, man? What does he got to do? Like psychological torture or some shit.
But, it really is. I mean,
some hypnotic shit, man.
I feel like Daniel Day-Lewis. I feel like Paul Thomas Anderson is one of those guys where before he goes on to, I think a lot of directors do this, but I think for him even it's excruciating. He's writing probably novels of like character backstory for his actors to get like a full picture of who these people are. Because man, I don't even see how you could direct these characters so well. Particularly Joaquin Phoenix, he is a drunk. Oh my God, he just won't stop drinking. It's like that scene where like they're releasing him from like fighting in the war, and he's like emptying the gas out of the thing. He starts drinking it. Like, yo, what the like that was wild to me. You just tell this dude loves being drunk, has this super tortured. It's almost cartoony how broken this guy is. But it's perfect because it makes sense in the context of the story why somebody who is as broken, as damaged, as alcoholic and sex driven as Joaquin Phoenix would need to rely on something like The Cause, would need to rely on this, pseudo Scientology kind of thing.
Pretty much Scientology.
Yeah. Just crafted up by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
Why he would need to depend on something like that, because he is just he's gone. He's far gone.
And that's exactly the kind of people that this place and the master himself is that's the kind of people he targets. Mm-hmm. The kind of people who are broken and the kind of people who are looking for something, some meaning or some purpose or something to drive their lives. And the way that Philip Seymour Hoffman's character presents it as science and presents it as fact and as logic and as intellectual kind of ideology and not just fantastical ideology is what appeals to people so much, because you don't have that need to question it, because you feel like this guy is so smart, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, that he can just explain it away kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the way they develop that relationship that they have with each other is very much interesting, because they have that friendship throughout pretty much the whole movie that they develop.
Definitely, without a doubt.
So it's interesting the way this movie presents that kind of inception of Scientology.
Yeah, it's I read stories. Apparently, Tom Cruise, obviously a good friend of Paul Thomas Anderson. Apparently, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. Apparently, PTA invited him to an early screening of The Master, and he got really mad. Tom Cruise got really mad. Apparently, I'm not sure though.
Yeah, I believe it, man, because this movie is like it's not a good look at.
Oh, dude, are you kidding? It's saying the shit's fake. Yeah. Like, it's all saying that thing. Which I don't want to discourage religions here or anything.
It's like we don't want to offend our
for all the Scientology
Scientology people listening.
Yeah.
Um,
Will Smith, please hire your boy still. I know you're a Scientologist, but you don't have to. Don't take anything I say here.
Is he really?
I mean, that's the big thing. Yeah.
Is he? I don't know. I know Tom Cruise is like
John Travolta.
Ever since I saw that documentary, man, Going Clear.
Yeah.
that thing disturbed the crap out of me, man. And the way they said, like, if you watch Going Clear, if you've seen it, like, they basically said that Tom Cruise is a god in the religion.
Really?
Yeah. Remember that? Did you see it?
Yeah.
They were, like, talking about the different levels of, like, that you can reach. And that Tom Cruise was, like, god level, basically. And he's, like, on a different... Like, the only one who's, like, on his level is the guy who's, like, running the place now. Like, his friend.
Yeah.
What's his name? I forget his name.
I don't know. I don't remember.
But basically, I was just like, yo, this is some creepy ass shit, bro.
Yeah.
But the way it's broken down too is that I don't even know what to call it. It's almost like an interrogation scene, but it's essentially that scene of the questions,
the processing,
the auditing, I guess is what it is.
Auditing. And then the Nerd Writer had a great video on that scene.
That's
too.
right. I've seen that.
Yeah,
where he talks about how it's basically what he calls command hypnotism, where it's a different type of hypnosis based on overbearing commands and overpowering your person who's in front of you, your auditor or your person that you're asking the questions to. And it's a sense of command and release where the person asking you these questions is giving you these commands that you have to obey, and you feel the need to obey them because he's the person who you've committed to as far as asking these questions and answering the questions truthfully.
Right.
So
like not blinking, so your
and
mind's
not blinking,
focused on that
so your
one
eyes
thing.
focused, and it's a type of like hypnotism in the sense of like torture, in a sense where you're imposing your physical rules on people and then asking them to break themselves down on a psychological level. So it's a psychological manipulation and something that he calls command hypnotism, which is something that obviously Scientology is based upon, but that they deny obviously frequently.
Which I think is so interesting when you watch that scene and the whole release moment cuts immediately to that flashback of him walking and meeting Doris for the first time. And like that, I mean, that whole sequence is like, it's kind of like a microcosm of film editing in and of itself, right? Because it's mostly locked on Joaquin's Phoenix the entire time because his eyes stay open. And you know, if you read Walter Murch's book, In the Blink of an Eye, a lot of what he's saying in that book is the idea of editing almost reflecting like how the motion of our eyes work, how we relate things to different, in real time. And, right when, and I think this is so great in that movie when they show it, when his eyes are open the entire time, it's just locked on him. You're focused just on him. And it's just like his inner psyche coming out. So when he finally closes his eyes, it goes right back to like the memories that he had that Philip Seymour Hoffman extracted out of him just like that. So it's so, I don't know, this movie to me is like next level performances like all across the board, and it's also like really great editing in a way in the context of the form of how this movie's crafted. There's also going from that audit scene to that scene where Joaquin Phoenix character's Freddy, they force him to like keep walking back and forth from a wall to a window, and like that's just a really like fascinating like psychological journey that he has to go on just in that individual moment. It was part of like this larger montage of like training him because at the end of the day he's so reckless and so violent that he's so like unpredictable that they have to like reel him in somehow. So they're basically like not just like hypnotism, they're like full on like destroying this guy's mind to be so dependent on their system of religion.
It's almost training an animal. It's almost like an animalistic type thing,
right?
Where they're treating him like a pet. They're treating him like a wild beast in a zoo, and now they have to like condition him to be used to living in that zoo, where he's used to living in the wild. And
Philip Seymour Hoffman, even he compares him a lot of times to animals, like, oh, you dirty animal, you acting like an animal, all that kind of stuff. It's very psychological, and I think that's so much of what this movie is. It's just like a psychological journey, a trip inside of this like completely broken dude's like mind and how he feels, and he's so erratic and so out there that like the fact that Philip Seymour Hoffman is able to manipulate him and bring him in and reel him in, who's supposed to be like this E. Ron Hubbard guy, the kind of rip off. L. Ron Hubbard, yeah. I don't know if the name of his character is in this movie, but
I think it's Doddard.
Doddard, yeah. But in the same way that Scientology is, the whole idea of Scientology is manipulation and hypnosis. But it's also just making shit up as they go along. Like, hey,
I mean, what's his face? Jeremy.
Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, he plays the son in this.
Lancaster Dodd.
Yeah.
And obviously Amy Adams
plays the wife.
Remy
Malek. Hey,
I
didn't know you showed up in this movie.
I'm in this movie, man. I have a great part in this movie, man. Do you really look like me in this movie?
Not in this movie. I don't think. Definitely in Mr. Robot stuff is probably more.
I'm in this movie, guys. You can find me.
You're there.
Rami Malek's in this movie.
Rami Malek had a great part. This is my first time seeing Rami Malek really in anything. And yeah, he has a great part in this film. I think just the way. Overall, I mean, to me, the only thing with this movie is that great performances all around the board, great cinematography, great editing. I mean, the cinematography can't be understated in this movie, particularly in that scene where Freddy is like has to take the picture of the dude, and he keeps like pushing the light closer to him. It's like, I'm just trying to get the lighting right, and he starts choking the guy, and they start fighting in like that mall area or whatever. Salute to whoever was running the camera and the focus during that scene, because man, I can't even imagine like trying to get that right. I don't know how many takes they had to do with that, but man, that shit must have been insane. All the different focus marks, like I don't know. For all like cinematography people out there, please like sharing my enthusiasm.
Who was it? Who was it?
It's the same thing. Robert Elswitz, who's responsible for the cinematography of this movie.
That's incredible. Editing by Leslie Jones. Leslie Jones.
SNL's Leslie Jones. I highly doubt it. No,
she's an editor.
Okay.
Leslie Jones and
Peter
McNulty.
Leslie is
I know Peter
Mel's
McNulty.
name.
Music by Johnny Greenwood.
Yeah, music again. It's another Johnny Greenwood. Johnny Greenwood was a collaborator ever since.
Mark Bridges, who won.
For one best costumes and the costume in this movie. Again, all this movie all around on the technical aspect.
No, check it out, bro. Cinematography is by Mihai Malarmi.
Oh, really? Okay.
Interesting. Who is this guy?
Whoever this guy is, salute to him. And
he's a Romanian guy.
It was shot on 70 or 65 millimeter, if I'm not mistaken. And it was projected in 70 millimeter upon its release.
Interesting. This guy, I mean, he shot some
Apple commercials,
weird movies and stuff. I mean, Apple commercials,
Drake stuff. Wow, interesting. A Walk Amongst Tombstones.
A Walk Among the Tombstones.
Oh, that Hancock documentary he did too. Wow, it's interesting. Yeah,
interesting. It's like a Romanian dude.
Yeah, I didn't know, but see, it's again, Paul Thomas Anderson changing up cinematographers per movie now, as he's been progressing his career.
I mean, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's good. It's actually good. I think this needed a different kind of feel and aesthetic. It kind of adopts like the 1940s, 1950s kind of like stock of film that like look. It kind of encompasses that a lot. Again, this movie's great on a technical level. I think my only thing with it is the like actual story itself. I think this movie could have. I don't know. I think it could have used a little more oomph, if that makes any sense.
You don't think the performances give it that?
I think that
I do.
I think the performances and the cinematography, the editing gives it that oomph. I just wish the story would have had some sort of emotional kind of. I mean, to me, like I love Paul Thomas Anderson movies because there's always one point in any of his movies where you kind of feel like you want to cry. At least to like not necessarily to the fullest extent, but it's like you feel like super emotional about it. I just kind of wish they would have had that kind of moment in this movie. The closest you get to that is when Joaquin Phoenix goes back to like his hometown and he visits his Doris, like his one true love. He goes back to the house and it turns out she's married. She married somebody else and all this kind of stuff. To me, that was probably like the big emotional crux of that. But the way Joaquin Phoenix reacts to that, and again, that's probably because of his training and his commitment to the cause, how that emotional crescendo doesn't really affect them nearly as much as you think it would. Is less of like I'm mad, I'm really sad about this. It's more of like, okay, I guess I just have to deal with it, which does just demonstrate a certain amount of growth and through the process and all that stuff. I just kind of wish it would have been more of a that punch that I like seeing in all Paul Thomas Anderson movies.
Do you feel like that was eventually realized at the end of the movie though? Because you were talking about the growth, but eventually it kind of ends with him kind of coming back to where he was before in a sense.
Yeah. Well, again, I think this is another example of like the rise, the fall, and the rise again. Like he rises up through being a part of this program, personally. But then when he leaves, he discovers, he comes back to find out the real world's just been cheating him this entire time. So he comes back to where he finds home, and his happiness is in this really kooky, strange cult, which maybe isn't the happy ending that like Boogie Nights is, in the same way that Boogie Nights ends in that same kind of way, like with Dirk Diggler leaving his home and then coming back to the house. I think this one's a little like less upbeat. It's more of like, he's trapped in this cycle of the religion. Which again I think is interesting because I think back in like his Magnolia days, he was very in tune with like some sort of spirituality to some extent, whereas I feel like in like the deconstruction of religion and There Will Be Blood and the kind of exposure of the falsities of the cause in this movie kind of reflects a different shift in Paul Thomas Anderson's view on religion. I think is very interesting. I definitely think that this movie has a lot to say from a philosophical standpoint, from a religious standpoint, but also just from a character standpoint as well.
Sure, as far as like, yeah, but I just feel like it's difficult to nail that in something with Scientology, right? Because it's hard to be like, well, is it though? Scientology's more. It's a little nuttier than your average religion.
Listen, I don't want to. Again, all Scientology listeners out there, I know how many Scientology fans we have out there. Don't take this as shitting on your religion.
It's really not. It's what the movie is saying about your religion.
The outsider perspective of Scientology is not necessarily positive. That's the thing. Yeah.
As someone who lives in LA, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Just because LA is the most, I was gonna say infested, but that's a negative connotation.
I will say, I mean, this is not an opinion. This is an actual fact. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. Like, yeah, he was. So, take that with what you want to take that as.
Yeah, he wrote the great movie that we've got with John Travolta. What is it called? Battlefield Earth. Battlefield Earth.
Yeah.
Hey man, that's a Scientologist wrote that shit. That's why we don't like your religion. Because you make shitty movies.
Whoa. I'm not saying I don't like your religion. Make good movies. Hey, listen, they gave us Tom Cruise, man. Let's be happy with that, man. Like, come on, dog.
They gave us Tom Cruise.
Mission Impossible.
I like Tom Cruise, but that's not what we. Never mind. we should take that away from it, as if they like birthed him out of their womb or something.
Hey, man,
they kind of did.
See, here's the thing. Okay, there was a Tom Cruise stage where he was an actor. There's a Tom Cruise stage where he's an action star. I love his acting days, but I love the action star stuff.
Sure.
Almost more.
Do you like that Mission Impossible trailer?
I love the Mission Impossible. Oh, dude, the new one.
The trailer. Don't with this.
Yeah.
That song that plays.
See, to me, what I love about that trailer is that they literally probably show you every stunt in the movie. Yeah. And it's like the coolest thing. Like, trucks crashing into each other, motorcycles being flipped over, fights, like
Henry Cavill kicking ass, with his mustache.
You literally see Tom Cruise like break his ankle in a trailer. Like this, that to me is like I don't even have to watch the movie. I can just watch that trailer, like, and it gives me all the stunnage I just need.
Henry Cavill, man, the return of the stash. Hashtag Stashgate.
Stashgate. Oh man.
But yeah, I mean. It's just, I feel like it's difficult to pinpoint perspectives on religion with something like a view on Scientology, if that makes any sense, versus an ancient religion like Islam or Christianity or something Buddhism or something like that that's much more grounded in tradition and in culture.
Right.
I feel like that's much more an indication of religiousness than is Scientology.
Right.
Without, making people feel bad about
Hey,
themselves.
Scientology is a new thing, man.
It's just new. That's all I'm saying. It's really new. So it's hard to compare that to something like Islam, which is ancient.
Hey, you never know, though. Maybe in like 300, 400 years, Scientology, maybe like 3% of Americans turn into Scientologists. You never know.
Oh, my God.
Hey, wait, man, bro. You never know. We might get more Tom Cruises, though, man.
Is that a good thing? Oh, man. Watch Going Clear, guys. That's all I'm saying.
The Master, though, absolute masterpiece. The masterpiece, if you will.
Yeah. Shout out to myself in that movie.
Rami Malek, yeah, great in that film. So many other great moments in that thing too. It's just overall, it's again another commentary on religion that I think religion and the corporate aspects that come into it, which I think is the biggest theme in his next movie.
Let's do it. Inherent Vice is a movie that came out in 2014.
2014. December of 2014.
And this is a movie that actually has his wife. Isn't Maya Rudolph his wife?
Yep.
His wife is in this movie. Maya Rudolph and PTA. Isn't that the most awkward couple ever in Hollywood?
Yeah.
As soon as I found that out, I was like, Maya Rudolph and Paul Thomas Anderson? What?
They got kissed together.
What?
Yeah.
That's the weirdest couple ever, man.
Yeah.
I guess that's where he gets his weird comedy from.
Yeah. I think probably
for real. That's probably where he gets his comedy from.
I think probably Paul Thomas Anderson probably is like a much funnier dude than like.
I agree.
He less on.
Like this movie, for example, it has that dark humor that I've been talking about.
It's very comedic. It's also
very comedic.
Very confusing.
Very confusing. Very weird.
It's
probably my least favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah, it's not great.
But I will say though,
it has a lot to say.
It does have a lot to say, and the more that you kind of have to sit on it and rewatch it and think about it, the clearer what it has to say becomes. That being said, it's probably like there is as much it's adapted based on the book Inherent Vice by the same title, written by, I forget who wrote the novel that it's based on, but the book is apparently just equally as confusing too. So he was definitely adapting that sense of it. It's just that there's so many different names, so many different places, so many different like things. You have to literally be taking notes to like.
It's like Lord of the Rings.
Oh, no, stop it.
Whoa.
Stop it. You can understand Lord of the Rings now. Like.
Yeah, but man, I swear, so many names, man.
See, okay, that's my thing. I love Lord of the Rings. I can't do. Said this before. Intergeek them now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, just so many names.
We must go to the Rosenfloth and battle the Borosdog and the Baradog versus the Aradog and Saruman and the Sardog. I'm like, dude, what? I can't, bro. And I love Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones that's what people say about Game of Thrones, and I'm like, bro. Watch Lord of the Rings. That's 10 times worse than Game of Thrones.
Well, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, so I'm not sure. But Lord of the Rings is dope. This movie is dope though. It doesn't get a lot of credit.
What do you think is the bigger theme that you were saying that it becomes clear?
I think to me is very much an anti-corporatist type of movie. And I think that's where you see. I think this movie is really about how the cycle of corporatism keeps a revolving head. It's ultimately about this corporation led by Michael Greenwolf, I think is his name.
What is it? The Golden Fang?
The Golden Fang, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's this big corporation responsible for boats and all this stuff. Again, another theme of water. And we didn't even mention water in The Master, but that's a very prominent theme in The Master too, is the water. That being at sea. But this movie is very much about like the beach life, what the hippie life is, but it's also about how, this organization, the Golden Fang, they're selling they're selling drugs and heroin, all this stuff that fucks up people. It's weird, so weird. It fucks up people's teeth. So then they also open the dentist office so they could go get their teeth fixed.
Yeah.
And it's like that's like the fucking cycle that capitalism like actually is.
Yeah.
And it goes further than that, obviously, but there's so much deep corruption and seediness in this story of trying to discover exactly what's happening and who's connecting what. But a lot of people say it's this movement from the 1960s hippie lifestyle, the kind of live free and have this open, into the open corruption that ensued in like the early to late 70s.
Sure. It's that transition between that open whatever, do whatever you want to like the corporate capitalistic mindset of the 70s.
It's the difference from the Kennedy / Lyndon B. Johnson era of America to the Richard Nixon era. You know what I mean? And how that corruption and how capitalism really drove and influenced a lot of people in a lot of different lives, including the life of Joaquin Phoenix's love interest in this movie. Yeah, I can't remember her name. Do you?
I forget her name too. Yeah. I know his name is Doc in the movie.
Yeah, he's Doc. It's pot smoking detective, and Shanta is her name. Shanta is the chick who he's been trying to.
This girl?
Yeah.
You mean Shasta?
Shasta. Yeah, how do you pronounce it? Shasta. Whatever.
Shasta.
He's trying to find out the mystery of where she's at and everything. And there's a lot of theories to like what actually it means.
Sure.
What actually, is she real? Is she just?
It's a narrator, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's the narrator. Yeah. But if you notice, she only narrates this movie in flashbacks. Mm-hmm. So is she really alive? Is that whole thing of her coming to visit him in the middle of the night at the very opening, is that the only time she is alive? Is that the only time? Or is he just hallucinating? Is he just super high and he's just imagining that?
Well, that's the thing too, right? Yeah. It's the whole idea of the untrustworthy narrator kind of thing. Mm-hmm, where it plays with the audience expectations and the audience perspectives on what a narrator's job is, which is to tell the truth. Right?
And you're never sure what's real or what's not real. I think that adds another layer of confusion to what's happening a lot of times in the story too. So it's very noir, very neo-noir in its sensibilities as well. It takes a lot of influence from movies like Chinatown, and
it's got a lot of weird, quirky characters.
Yeah, a lot of weird, quirky characters.
What's his name? Martin Short.
Comes in for one scene.
Yeah. Josh Brolin's in this movie.
Yeah. Very straight-laced guy, but then like he also has this weird subplot of being on TV commercials.
Jenna Malone. Joanna Mason from the Hunger Games. Whoa. What? Hunger Games connection again?
2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row.
Wow.
3 weeks actually. I did it with Nolan.
Yeah, the Nolan.
Every week, guys, come in next week for your following
for
Hunger Games
commentary with
Hunger
Ace
Games
and
connection.
RB3. This is so. But yeah, it's the whole, like you said, the idea of the untrustworthy narrator, the subjective reality, what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, subjective versus objective.
Yeah,
reality.
Subjective versus objective and all that stuff. And like you said, the cast really adds to like the weirdness of it.
Sure.
Because you don't really, as opposed to most Paul Thomas Anderson movies where you get like a very rich kind of detailed description of each one of these people. This movie's kind of almost the opposite. You get like no information, just reading off of the people's like performances.
It's kind of I don't want to say the word messy, but it's kind of messy.
Yeah,
in a sense,
well,
right?
it's definitely messy. Yeah,
absolutely.
But
that's what I'm saying. Like it's super like all over the place and kind of messy in a storytelling perspective and in a character perspective too.
Definitely. So I think that's why it's not regarded as probably one of his better films.
It's still an amazing performance.
There's still great performances all around. Joaquin Phoenix, kills it. And I actually think again, I didn't read the book, but if the book is really as confusing as this movie, salute to them for even trying to make it. That's really impressive.
Owen Wilson, I forgot he was.
Owen Wilson, yeah. But again, you kind of question if his scenes are real too or not. So it's kind of hard to talk about what's the deeper meaning of this movie if there's like not a lot to go off of. But I definitely think the corporatism is what this movie is essentially about, and how corporatism and corruption is, frankly, kind of killing people, and just having all of these different like weird side effects on how we look at reality and all this kind of shit. So very interesting.
I was gonna say, let's move on to his next one.
I'm looking at your computer. See, here's the thing with Paul Thomas Anderson's IMDb. I think he puts almost every music video he directs on here. So then or maybe his publicist, I don't know, or whoever manages the shit.
His IMDb?
Yeah. So it's like literally, it's like, oh, what's his next movie? And it's all fucking music videos. Yeah. Like right here,
Radiohead, Haim.
Yeah.
Shout out to Haim.
Haim's a good. I don't know who Haim is actually.
Really? So, it's the three Jewish little sisters who are super quirky and play like in a little rock band. You don't know who they are?
I don't know who they are. I'm sorry. I only listen to trap music.
Whatever, bro.
Yeah, trap.
You listen to white people music too, bro. Come on, man.
Stuff Jen Stevens is the only white person I'm willing to listen. I'm kidding, by the way.
You listen to a lot of white people music.
Do I really?
Yeah, you do, man.
I do.
Come on, Travis Scott. That's
Travis
like white
Scott.
people music all the way.
Oh, Travis Scott. Come on, dog. Nah, it is white people. It's it's funny, man. Hip hop is so like. I think there's that one line in that one Brad Hampton song. It's like I love my friends like white people love hip hop. Yeah. I think that's so true. Like
I think that's got to end eventually, man. Because I'm watching a lot of Desus and Mero, and shout out to anyone who watches Desus and Mero. It's this comedy duo on Viceland, and I think they're hysterical. And they really like point out a lot of shit that I've never really noticed. But I think that's got to end eventually. And Atlanta, too. Watch Atlanta. Atlanta talks about that, too. Like the connection between hip-hop and white people and black people and all that shit. And the difference between, like, the guy who does the Yoo-Hoo song, Yoo-Hoo, Yoo-Hoo, versus, like, Paperboy and versus other guys. But even then, Paperboy's got a bunch of white fans, too. And it's, like, the mom reading the lyrics of Paperboy. Like, there's this weird connection, this circular cycle of hip-hop music that I know a lot about because I've followed hip-hop for years, but you know a lot about, too, because you have, too.
Yeah.
And it's just, eventually it's got to end. Let's just come together, man. Yeah. White people always will and always will forever love hip-hop. Hey, that's just the way it's gonna be.
Hey, nah, man.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, white people, keep listening to it, man. keep making these brothers coming out of the hood. Keep making them rich. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, remember I texted you about Desus Mero?
Yeah,
have you seen their shit?
Yeah.
Do you like their shit?
I like them. I think
Do you feel like they're too trolly or what?
I think they're very trolly.
Because they're very trolly.
Yeah, they're super trolly. And,
like they just troll people.
Yeah. I think I like Desus Mero. I kind of don't like what they represent almost. Okay. Kind of in a way.
What do you think they represent?
I'm more of a fan of like the YouTube type of like hip hop commentary. And
your team DJ Academics.
Yeah, I'm Academics.
That's why. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, y'all. I like new media, man, and they're TV guys, so it is what it is. But
hey, man, you feel like that's what they represent, though?
Yeah, I feel like they represent the establishment. Plus, I don't know if you saw the whole thing when they won the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, of course I saw it. With DJ Envy. But DJ Envy is like extra establishment.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, but I just think that's so funny.
It was funny.
Yeah. I don't know, man. They're all really good. I love hip hop commentary. I love all of it.
I think they're great, man. I think they're funny. And I think they take themselves not as seriously as you might think they do.
Yeah.
I don't think they care.
I do. No, I watch the show like every week. Like, so I'm a fan, but I don't know.
You just love Academics too much.
I like Ac, and I like a lot of other YouTube channels that do
like what?
There's the other guy called Chauncey or something. His name is.
Okay.
He does also like hip hop reviews. I don't know. We're going into a weird rabbit hole here. Yeah.
Speaking of hip hop, Phantom Thread.
The most hip hop movie you're ever gonna watch.
Hip hop for life.
Yeah.
Bro. It's about a freaking designer. What's more hip hop than designer?
Designer, yo, panda.
Hey,
what happened to designer? All right, enough of hip hop. Let's get to actually the movie.
This movie we obviously talked about a little bit on our Oscar episode. We talked about it on our top 10 episode. Mm-hmm. You had it in your top 10.
I had it number 5.
Did I have it in my top 10? I forgot.
I'm not sure.
I forgot.
I think you saw it after we did the top 10 video.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yeah. I didn't have it in my top 10 then. This movie gave us Vicky Creeps. We will never forget Vicky Creeps.
That's a running joke on this show.
Running joke on this show. This movie's crazy, man. This movie is. I know you loved it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't love it, but I really did enjoy it quite a bit. I think once again, it's all about the characterization of Daniel Day-Lewis's character of Woodcock. I believe that's his name, right? Woodcock?
The Woodcock, probably.
Woodcock, yeah, Reynolds Woodcock, which is a great name. Yeah, it's all about his characterization and his very, not similar, but kind of that ambition and that mad genius that he is as far as a designer, and how he has to have people around him to support his genius in a way and kind of tolerate his mannerisms and his obsession. Mm-hmm. And his OCD, kind of, because he has like OCD,
right? And
the people around him are there to allow his brain to function on a artistic level, and it's dealing with an artist because he's an artist, and at the end of the day, he's an artist.
Yeah,
and it's the story of how to deal with that ambitious artist who is so meticulous and so like persistent, kind of like a director would be too. Like you hear so many stories about directors, like even like a Tarantino, who's just crazy and who's like so in his head and shit that if you talk to him on set or something, that he will get mad. That's kind of who Woodcock represents. It's that crazy artist who then kind of has like a weird fascination with the Vicky Krieps character, and it's like an infatuation. It's not at first. It's not even like I would say romantic. It's more like fascination. It's more like you have a weird, interesting look, aesthetic to your face and to your body.
Right.
And I'm an artist, and I appreciate aesthetic, and I appreciate looks and visuals. Therefore, I am infatuated with you, kind of thing. I don't know if that's how you took it.
No, I think definitely. I think even the lady says it. His assistant,
his
Is
sister.
this his sister? Or is it?
Leslie Manville. I think it's his sister.
Oh, okay, it's his sister. I didn't know. I thought she was just a random chick that lived there.
Or it might be his assistant. I might be wrong, dude.
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure. Again, this was tough because we couldn't rewatch it.
Yeah,
I think they literally just put it out on Blu-ray. Yeah, so I don't know. So
last time we saw it was in
theaters. Yeah. So this one's a little tough for us to do a full breakdown of. But she even says like she told Vicky Krieps like you have the exact type of body that he likes to model dresses around. So that's why he brings her in. Again, I think there's another movie that
you said you love this one though. Right?
Oh yeah,
you thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, it's probably if we're gonna rank the Paul Thomas Anderson the newer films, I'll probably put There Will Be Blood #1, this one #2, because I feel like this is one of the most well-rounded. Just on a performance standpoint, from Daniel Day-Lewis, is probably one of his best performances. I feel like, and I know it's tough to say, just Daniel Day-Lewis. Every performance he does is great.
Sure,
but this one is less built around a real person, and I know they took some influence from like this 1950s fashion designer or whatever, but it's less about it's less about the inspiration, but more about the detail that's put into his character. I mean, just like the looks, the mannerisms, the slight touches to his afflictions when he says certain things is it feels very complete. You know, you don't have to learn anything about this guy's past, but you could totally tell what kind of guy he is, like how he grew up and all that kind of stuff. And I just think that's just brilliant through and through. So to me, this is something this is for some reason, I feel like this movie connects to a lot of really interesting themes that really Paul Thomas Anderson hasn't really explored before.
Sure.
And it's kind of like this new kind of thing, I feel like. And in terms of, it's still the dynamic of the power versus the control versus the uncontrolled, the unsure, but kind of flips that in a certain way too, where we really come to find out that the Vicky Krieps character is really the one who has the hold over him,
sure.
in a way. So it's very.
I kind of want you to elaborate on that a little bit more.
On what part?
On the part of the themes that Paul Thomas Anderson hasn't really tackled before. What do you mean by that?
Well, I feel like there's definitely, I mean, a lot of his films are about the artistic process.
Sure.
But there's never really movies where he highlights, I mean, of course, Boogie Nights does show the flaws of like Jack Warner and stuff. But this movie is not, I feel like his previous movies are about artists who have flaws. This movie is a flawed person who so happens to be an incredible artist in and of himself. I feel like this movie highlights the idiosyncrasies and the flaws and the ways in which this artist character is kind of devolves in and of himself as a human being, how his flaws and his like what he hates and what he loves influences his art just as much as the art influences him as an individual, how his level of perfection is necessary in the real world just as much as is needed in his artistic standpoint, which I think that's profound in a lot of ways. I think that's something we haven't really seen in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. And I also, like I said before, the whole idea of the usual relationship that you see in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie, the mentor versus the mentoree, the father versus the son, the power dynamic that you see, and we didn't even mention the master, the whole like father and son relationship there too. But this one definitely, it takes that usual relationship that a Paul Thomas Anderson movie would normally have and completely flips it to make you question where's the power dynamic in this, who has the power, who's learning from who, and they're both kind of taking away from each other. And I think that's one of the more powerful aspects of this.
And that's kind of how the movie ends, right? Where it's like they find this weird, odd, disturbing balance of power between themselves. And the character of Woodcock, Daniel Day-Lewis, kind of, instead of being taken aback and challenged by it, he appreciates the challenge of it because he knows what's going on, and he kind of likes it in a weird sadistic way, as far as her poisoning him and putting him on his back, like she says in the movie. And he kind of appreciates that he has someone who can match his overbearing, huge, big personality and power with the character of Vicky Krieps. And he takes that invitation of a challenge as a equal. That scene where he proposes to her, dude.
Yeah.
I was like gripping my chair.
Dude, literally, so that's
gripping my chair.
That's
for a proposal scene.
That to me is like why I ranked it number 5 in my top 10. Just in that little moment, that like little gap in space where she tells him he poisoned her, and then like there's like that little silence there, and you're just like, what is he gonna say?
Is he gonna kill her? I thought he was gonna kill her.
Yeah. You would think that, but then
I thought he was gonna like choke her to death or something.
Yeah. But then like that also would have been like inconsistent, I think, with who he is. And I think the fact that he lives with like this old lady who's like kind of commanding his life too kind of seemingly fits into that mode. Like, I don't know. So it's very so like that like level of suspense, and then the ultimate payoff being like kind of almost the perfect way to end this movie. Like the way this journey goes, I don't really see how you could like end this any other way almost, you know? So I just really appreciate it on that front.
Yeah.
But yeah, amazing film.
Hey man, she just wanted to go dancing, bro. All you have to do is just go dancing with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie is definitely a look inside the mind of a crazy, a successful artist too, because that's the thing too, is that he's very successful. He's not just a smart genius artist, but he's actually very successful, has his own company, designs dresses for princesses and princes and very high-end, extremely rich and powerful people and world leaders and stuff.
Now, some would even go as far as to argue that this is the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie that has like a proper female lead. Do you think that's something you agree with, or?
Yeah, in a way, it depends how you define proper, right? Proper as an actual female lead, as far as who a female can be. Yes. As far as female lead in general, I mean, you got Amy Adams.
But is she the lead in that movie, or is she a supporting player?
No, you're right.
I mean, Julianne Moore.
Julianne Moore would be the closest other one.
Yeah, and Boogie Nights. But then even still, it's really about Mark Wahlberg. I think this movie is about the designer guy, but it's
also
more of a
about
balance.
Vicky Krieps too. Yeah.
What's her character's name? We keep calling her Vicky Krieps.
Well, that's her name, man. Alma.
Alma.
Yeah,
I like Vicky Krieps more. Let's go with Vicky Krieps.
Well, I mean, we can call her Alma too. Make up your mind, RB3. No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean that's a lame name.
She was there. We got the chance to talk to her.
Yeah.
I did.
Oh, you did. Yeah.
At our screening or whatever that I went to.
Yeah.
At the theater.
ArcLight.
No, it wasn't the ArcLight. It was the other one that holds screenings and shit. I forget what it's called.
Landmark.
Yes.
Landmark.
Yeah.
Landmark's the other one. Movie Pass takes Landmark now.
But ArcLight doesn't, and ArcLight's the only theater I go to. You know that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we got to talk to her, and she was able to take Q&A and stuff, and answer everyone's questions, and then take pictures with everyone afterwards.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for a picture because I didn't feel like it, but I sometimes I feel, I don't know, I'm gonna get into a whole rabbit hole of talking about pictures and artists and all that. I usually don't want to, just because I don't like bothering them.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless you're like The Rock.
Yeah. I have to get a picture with The Rock.
Yeah, but it's something like I don't want to bother people, and where it's someone like, if it's someone that that wants to be bothered, like The Rock wants to be bothered, like that guy. How many times he posts on social media, like you can tell that guy wants to be bothered.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was great, and she was super nice, and she was super foreign, which is great. It's great, man. She's like super European. She's from Luxembourg and speaks German and French. And,
wow.
Yeah, she was cool. And she's great in this movie. Great.
Yeah, she holds her own against
She holds her
Daniel
own
Day.
against Daniel Day, and that's
Yeah.
not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Few people have done it. Paul Dano's another one who did it in There Will Be Blood, but she is definitely a standout in this movie, and her perspective is you're right, because this movie gives her a perspective versus other PTA movies that don't give too many female characters perspectives. But she has a perspective in this movie, and you could see it throughout the entire film of how she views Daniel Day-Lewis's character and what characterization he has and how he goes about his life and how she views him going about his life and how she views their relationship and how she wants more out of that relationship. And her frustration with him as well, and kind of her curiosity with other people too, because remember that doctor guy that she's like flirting with and that he gets kind of mad at too, and he has like this stubbornness towards her, so it's kind of like a pull back and forth between them. It's like a really odd yet real, kind of realistic relationship between the two of them, right? Because realistic in the sense of like you deal with issues and you have to battle them and overcome them. Obviously not with the poison thing, which everyone kind of focuses on, because that's not really realistic or it happens that much.
Right.
And also that scene with his ghost mom. I like that scene. I know a lot of people might not like it, but I like that scene where she's just standing in the room. It's kind of creepy too. You know what I'm talking about, right? Just because you can see his relationship with his mother is something that he very much holds dear to, and his whole company, his whole business, his whole organization, his whole passion is based on the relationship of his mother and how he kind of crafted his designer mentality based on that too. And he talks about it throughout the movie. I think that's very interesting, and that's something that I bought easily, even though he's an older guy, which I found kind of interesting, because when you have that son-mother relationship, it's usually with a young man, like a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 25-year-old, a teenager. And you see that throughout dozens of movies. I can name a dozen of them. But with a guy who's like pushing 60 or even 60, it's kind of interesting to see that. Don't you think so? I found that interesting with an older guy who's kind of like 60 years old, kind of, or like pushing that age boundary. He's an old dude. Like he's at least 55, if not older. Having that weird kind of thing of his mother and always finding that thing to be his motivation. The connection he had with his mother is his everlasting motivation of his art, I guess you could say.
Right. No, absolutely. Again, this is one of the better Paul Thomas Anderson films. And I definitely... So my question is to you, Ace. If you had to rank the old Paul Thomas Anderson movies and or the new Paul Thomas Anderson, if you had to rank them separately or together, how would you rank them?
Let's do overall, just because we're at the end of our part 2 series.
Okay.
Let's do overall.
Okay.
Overall, number 1, There Will Be Blood.
Number 1, There Will Be Blood.
That is my favorite. Number 2, I would say,
Boogie Nights.
No.
Magnolia.
Man, it's tough. Yeah, number 2, Magnolia. Number 3, Phantom Thread.
Wow, Phantom Thread that high. Wow.
I think so.
Over Boogie Nights.
Yeah, I think so.
You not love Boogie Nights?
I love, but I like Phantom Thread more.
Oh, I feel that. Okay, I feel that. Okay.
Or The Master, because I love The Master too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put Phantom Thread up there. Top 3.
Top 3. Okay.
Everyone's screaming right now in the comments. What? Oh my God! They're like crashing their cars while listening to the podcast. How could you? How could you call yourself a PTA fan? Yeah, man, that's my top 3. I'm standing by it. I'm firm.
Okay.
How about you, man?
I feel that. Definitely Magnolia is my number 1. Okay. Boogie Nights might have to take the 2 spot. And I know it's pretty generic, and number 3 is There Will Be Blood.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I put Phantom Thread. I probably put Phantom Thread as like 4 or 5.
What would you put 4 or 5? What about The Master? What about Inherent Vice? What about Punch Drunk Love?
Here's my thing, man. Okay. So I would put Punch Drunk Love higher only because I could rewatch that the most.
Higher?
I'd probably put that as like.
You can rewatch Phantom Thread?
No, I can't rewatch Phantom Thread. I probably put Phantom Thread as like number 4
I can
or
rewatch
5.
this movie just based on the score. I'm not even
score.
kidding. I love that.
Well,
score.
see how you probably feel about the score for this movie. I feel about the score for Punch Drunk Love.
Okay.
The score for Punch Drunk Love is one of
It's
my
great.
favorite
It's beautiful.
soundtracks.
It's
Yeah.
great.
So that's where I would kind of get shifty. And I hate to put The Master as like number 6 or something like that too. Because I feel like as a director, The Master is probably his best directed movie.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
From like a cinematography, from the acting, from the
Music,
the editing. As a director, that's probably his best directed film. But as an overall piece, I enjoy Magnolia more. I enjoy Boogie Nights more. I enjoy There'll Be Blood more. And Punch Drunk Love, even though, and listen, if we're being real technical with it, it's probably one of his weaker films in Punch Drunk Love. But to me it's funny, it's heartwarming, and it has enough like weird artsy surrealism to kind of keep me interested as a film student. So I love it on that front. Probably Inherent Vice would be last though. I think we both agree on that.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, we have a good. I mean, this has been 2 fun episodes.
There's been 2 great episodes, man. Hopefully, hopefully the fans, hopefully the people out there, the homies,
iTunes listeners,
the PTA fanatics, the 10 people who love PTA. Right. No, I think he's got a bigger fan base than that. I think a lot of people appreciate him. He's definitely a director who has a very good understanding of what he's doing and a good understanding of working with actors, which again we've talked about before. That is probably the most important thing with a director, is getting performances out of actors. And if that is the true definition of a director, then this guy is one of the best. One of the best working directors today by far. The guy's a true genius for sure.